Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. I'm SocietySucks and today I'm checking out 11 most brutal torture methods by Mitsi Studio. I think I've seen multiple videos on the most brutal torture methods before, but the methods they talk about often vary. Obviously some are always the same, but there's always different ones. So let's see which ones Mitsi says are the most brutal ones. Oh, I see the... what's it called? The metal bull? I'm not sure what it's called. Sound
Archaeological
torture?
evidence suggests torture was prevalent about 7,000 years ago in early Neolithic Europe, although people were probably being cruel and torture-frenzy for a while longer. Despite torture still being practiced across the world, most Western countries don't use it anymore. For example, the US hasn't used torture since Guantanamo Bay.
Obviously, torture still happens in Western countries, just it's done far away from prying eyes to make sure nobody finds out that it's happening. But it definitely still happens to some degree.
That place became infamous for using loudspeakers to blast heavy metal music in a small room with a prisoner.
Oh,
Very
that
cruel.
would be terrible.
Except for that one prisoner who was actually a fan of heavy metal. This torture technique is often combined with long-term isolation and is used to cause severe stress on a prisoner's mental state. Ling Chi. Ling Chi translates to various names like slow process, lingering death, slow slicing, or death by 1,000 cuts. Not a convenient death if you were in a rush.
Very
This
slow
torture
and
method
painful.
was part of an execution process used in China around 900 AD. It was also used in Vietnam and Korea. The method was adopted to punish
probably
people
still
who
is used in
committed
North
heinous
Korea.
crimes. In most cases, the condemned person would be strapped to a beam or pole. Subsequently, a knife was used to cut small portions of skin or small body parts. Vital organs or veins were bypassed to make sure the victim would not die prematurely. According to Chinese beliefs, the execution was also a punishment after death, because the body would not transit whole to the spiritual life. If you think about it, the not transition.
Yeah, that's one thing I heard multiple times whenever I was looking up stuff about history, how certain punishments and torture methods were meant to be a way so that the soul cannot pass on into heaven. Let's just say heaven. Obviously, the afterlife depends what you believe in, but your soul wasn't able to pass on into paradise. Let's say paradise. Personally, I just think that's complete and utter nonsense, but they believed in it.
To spiritual stuff part might be the least concerning thing on your mind. If you are unlucky, the execution could last several days. And opium could be given to alleviate the suffering. Do you think shopping feels like torture on its own? Visit our Mitsi store and get some cool Mitsi merch today. We have tons of different
Big Willy. Yeah, there's another Big Willy right next to it. Who would buy that? Why would anybody buy that? You want to be seen out in public walking around with this kind of phone case? Hell no.
things, like this big willy on a shirt, a little willy on a little shirt, a picklehauber on your phone. Oh, almost forgot. We also have normal stuff, so take your pick.
Oh, there it is.
If this promo didn't make you depressed yet, go to mitsystore.com and order now. Or keep watching the video. I mean, who cares? Iron Maiden. For the introduction of this next device, we go back to the 19th century. Although some historians have argued that the device did not actually exist. But for the sake of this video, we believe that it did.
Yeah, I've heard that the Iron Maiden apparently isn't the way that it is portrayed in fiction, in movies and books. But yeah, so for this video, it's just assumed that it did exist and it is a torture method, a torture device.
Iron Maiden is a human-sized casket made from wood and iron spikes. The casket was made of multiple pieces that could be opened to allow a person to enter. The shape of the casket forced the new resident to stand upright for a long time. To make matters worse, the iron spikes would pierce the body
they'd
of
also
the
be
poor chap
impaled.
inside. The length of the spikes was long enough to pierce the skin and flesh, but were too short to reach any organs or other vital parts. Obviously, this was done to make sure the victim would suffer during their stay, but not necessarily die a quick death. Kind of like staying in a Park Plaza hotel. Keel hauling. The name keel hauling comes from the Dutch word keelhalen.
I think
The
everybody
invention
has
keel
heard of
hauling
this
was
one.
basically the result of being on a ship combined with Dutch ingenuity to come up with creative punishments with limited resources. The far-stretching Dutch-Asian trading routes had ships sailing the world seas for many months on end. Many cases of misconduct or mutiny broke out on these ships. To crack down on these revolts, captains enforced severe punishments on the agitators. With keel hauling, a long rope dragged the sailor under the hull of the ship. This method could play out in many ways. However, most outcomes were somewhere between bad and very bad. If it was bad, the sailor would be dragged
Most outcomes were between death and almost dead.
along the hull, which was usually covered in barnacles.
Yep, the barnacles
These would
would
cause
cut you.
painful lacerations. If the outcome was very bad, the sailor could die from head trauma, hitting the rocking hull, or simply but obviously drowning, which is the worst nightmare for every Dutch person. Rat torture.
Oh no, not this one.
Most people are not a fan of rats, and this next torture method is not going to change that. The most famous variant is the bucket rat torture, originating from the Tower of London's rat
Yeah, well, they put it on your
in the
belly and the
Elizabethan
rat
era. A
eats
dark
through
cell
you.
near the high water mark would draw in rats from the River Thames. The rats started to eat on the limbs of the prisoners while they were still alive, and not a very pleasant experience. During the Dutch Revolt, a pottery bowl filled with rats was placed upside down on the naked body of a prisoner. Hot charcoal was piled on the bowl, making the rats inside the bowl panic.
Yeah.
Desperate to escape the heat, the rats would eat their way into the bowels of the victim. This process would be quite horrifying and extremely painful, making the victim die a slow death. Later, several South American dictatorships followed up.
I was gonna say, this was also happening in South America up until actually quite recently. I think it was the 1970s where it was still happening in Chile. Okay, so I just checked, and apparently in Chile it was happening until 1990. That's only 35 years ago.
On the rat torture, with Argentina refining the method to something called a rectoscope, with rats being inserted into a tube
I've heard of this
so the
before.
rats could gnaw their way into a victim's rectum, elaborating on the expression, not giving a rat's ass.
Crucifixion, okay. Classic.
Crucifixion. A bad thing if you're not into slow deaths, but great if you're trying to promote a religion. Crucifixion was a method of capital punishment, where the victim was tied or nailed to a wooden beam or cross. The victims would be left hanging until they bled to death, or just with the passing of time and not being able to run to a supermarket. This method of capital punishment was used by the Persians, Carthaginians, and Romans, among others. During Emperor Titus's invasion of Jerusalem, many Jews were nailed to crosses. This was done by Jew-hunting Roman soldiers, including Mel Gibson. As mentioned before, victims could be hanged for days or exposed to
I'm not sure what that's a reference to or a joke about. I don't know who Mel Gibson is. Oh, he's a filmmaker, okay. So I'm guessing one of the movies he played in had a role where he was hunting Jews.
to the environment and being eaten by vultures. It is believed the most common cause of death during crucifixion was asphyxiation, with the condemned having serious trouble inhaling due to the hyperextension of the chest. The most famous crucifixion is, of course, the one where they hung Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins and promised he would come back for a visit. Didn't happen yet, still waiting. White room torture. No, not the new clubhouse name of the Proud Boys, but a torture technique using a small cell.
Yeah, I've heard of white room torture. I'm not sure how bad this would actually be, but I mean, if it's a torture method, I assume it is really bad.
Completely painted white. The effect on the prisoner's mental state would be significant over time. The prisoner would wear white clothing, eat white rice, and drink white milk. With the complete numbing of the senses, the prisoners would experience severe mental stress.
Yeah, because
paired
everything
with
is just the same. It's just
This
one
torture
color.
technique works extremely well for interrogations and is believed to be used in Iranian prisons and by the CIA. The Iranian regime
Wouldn't
shrugs
surprise
this
me.
off by being totalitarian, obviously. The US just calls it enhanced interrogation instead of torture. It seems both excuses work really well. Scaphism.
Oh no, I know this. I saw this in the
Floating on
CGP Grey
water in
video.
a little boat sounds relaxing,
No, not CGP Grey. Salmonella video.
right? Well, wrong. We are talking about scaphism here, an ancient Persian method of execution and probably one of the
It
nastiest
is
on our
vile.
list.
It's disgusting.
Before the whole boat floating stuff, you are fed honey and milk. Thereafter, you are strapped between two boats with your limbs hanging out. Next, you just get a small push, and there you are, floating on water filled with swarms of hungry vermin. With uncontrollable diarrhea. Do you want to see this anus?
No.
Join our Patreon for uncensored videos. No.
Ain't no way. There's no way. There's no way. This is how you promote your Patreon. Oh my god. I might have to check that out later. For research purposes, obviously.
Now, let's move on. It wouldn't take long for the vermin to find their way inside the boat and start eating the passenger's body from the inside out. Yikes. The Brazen Bull.
This is one I know.
The Brazen,
Brazen Bull.
also known as the Bronze Bull, Sicilian Bull, or Bull of Phalaris, was an ancient Greek torture device designed in the shape of a bull, obviously. With one door on the side, the condemned was placed inside of it. A fire was set under the bull,
And then
heating
you're
up
just
the
burned
metal
alive.
structure, frying the
Well,
victim
cooked
inside.
alive.
To make the whole process a true cinematic display, an acoustic apparatus inside the device converted the screams of the condemned into the sound of an infuriated beast. The inventor of the device, Phalaris, was later overthrown by Telemachus. Phalaris suddenly found himself locked inside his own designed bull.
Hey, you know what? That is karma right there. He invented this, and then he had to suffer it. That's fair. That's karma. He got what he deserved. Just think about it. People came to watch this. They watched it. This was entertainment back in those days. Insane.
Of Phalaris. Now, suddenly found himself locked inside his own designed bull of Phalaris. Now, literally. He would never hear his own screaming, just the sound of an infuriated bull. Bamboo torture.
torture, okay.
Bamboo torture, a kind of vegan colonoscopy, is a torture method that doesn't need many resources.
Wait, did it go
The
up your
victim would
ass?
be tied in a fixed
Oh,
position,
no.
overhanging one or multiple bamboo shoots. There are depictions of victims hanging in a horizontal position. A slower torture method is where the victim is hanging vertically. The bamboo shoot would grow up the victim's ass into his intestines.
Bamboo
At this
grows
stage,
quickly.
The victim would probably still be alive, but wishing he wasn't. With a growing speed of roughly a few centimeters an hour, the bamboo would slowly pierce the upper torso, eventually killing the victim. Since the body is hanging on a stick, bamboo torture is ideal for cannibalism parties.
Oh! Great!
Blood eagle.
Oh. It's actually highly debated whether or not the Blood Eagle actually ever happened. Most people seem to agree that it didn't, but I like to believe that it did.
The blood eagle is a torture technique that appears in Norse literature. A bunch of Vikings thought it would be a cool sight to chop open a man's back, sever his ribs from his spine, and pull their lungs through the gaping hole. The graphic resemblance to a bird shape gave this method the name blood eagle. Despite its appearance in Norse literature, there is no archaeological evidence to prove this method was adopted. For example, finding a corpse with chopped up ribs and floating lungs would definitely help. What we do know from research is that the blood eagle was more of an execution than an actual.
On one hand, some people who suffered this fate probably would have been buried, but at the same time, I mean, these are Vikings we're talking about. They believed in their own gods. Maybe the Blood Eagle was similar to one of the earlier ones we saw, the Death from 1,000 Cuts, I think that's what it was called. Maybe it's similar to that. And the reason for this punishment is so that you can't enter into Valhalla. Maybe they just then further desecrated the body by getting rid of as much of it as possible. I don't know.
Torture method. The victim would have died long before he might have thought, damn, I look like a bird now. Check
Probably
out
did
our new
die
store
very
for
quickly.
Cool Mitsi merch or join our Patreon community. Check out our Patreon.
I will
and
not
become a
be
member
checking out that
today.
Patreon. No thank you. I do not need or want to see any of that mess. So yeah, those were 11 very brutal torture methods. Of course, some, like the Blood Eagle, are highly debated whether or not they actually did happen, and most historians seem to agree that they didn't. But for the sake of this video, let's say that they did. The Blood Eagle would have probably been actually very quick. You probably would have passed out from pain or blood loss long before they actually managed to tear out your ribs. At least I would assume so. I don't think many people would have been able to live long enough to see to the end of that punishment. I mean, it's literally cutting into your back and tearing out your ribs. There's no way you're going through all of that without passing out. Like, no chance. So if that punishment did exist, it probably wasn't even that bad because you probably would have died very quickly. Not that it matters. Stuff like this doesn't happen anymore today, at least not on a big scale, because torture is a crime, unless you're the CIA or the Iranians or any other authoritarian regime who basically just does whatever the hell they want, especially behind closed doors. But yeah, the chances of anybody watching this video being tortured are very small, so we can rejoice knowing that none of us will ever really be tortured. Probably. So yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you want to see more reactions like this, please check out this video right here. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.